Okay, welcome back. Lesson 28, percents, decimals, and fractions. So I have a lot of nursing students and they often come to me and say they're getting ready for a dosage calculation exam and they're having trouble converting from percent to decimal to fraction without a calculator. So I hope this will help all those nursing students out there and of course the rest of my students. And I also hope that I don't have any spinach in my teeth today because this is the first time that I'm turning on the live cam. I thought I'd add a little personal touch there. So, understanding percents. The word percent comes from the Latin phrase per centum. I took 7 years of Latin. I don't know about you, but so per centum means per 100. So that means that percent means per 100. And the percent symbol itself is used to denote percent. So when we say 5%, we mean 5 per 100 or 5 out of 100. But guess what? That also means 0.05. So we're noticing a relationship between percent to fraction to decimal, right? Let's think about this statement here. We hear it on TV all the time. 4 out of 5 dentists choose Crest. So when you say 4 out of 5 dentists choose Crest, well, clearly that's a majority. But what percent is that? So perhaps there's a way to move from fraction, 4 out of 5, to percent. Well, what we're going to see here in the near future and on the next slide is that there is actually a recipe for converting your fraction into a decimal and then in turn a percent. So we know that we can divide the denominator into the numerator. And so 5 goes into 40 8 times. Draw the line and subtract. And voila, you have 0.8. So 0.8, or you could even say 0.80. 0.80 is your decimal equivalent to 4 out of 5. And then, as you can imagine, that's 80%. So you start to make this connection in your mind that, how do I move from decimal to percent? Perhaps I just slide the decimal 2 units to the right, virtually multiplying by 100, and voila, you have 80%. So we'll seal the deal on all those sort of recipes for moving from decimal to percent and vice versa here on the next slide. Here we go, writing a decimal as a percent. Just multiply your decimal by 100%, which in essence slides the decimal 2 units to the right. So I have a nice warm up here. So, all right, 0.65 times 100% will take us to 65%. So a lot of people just mentally kind of, when they have their 0.65, they just slide 2 units to the right and sort of do that in their head. But let's take a look at some of these together. So if we follow that, and I'll just kind of write them all out. So 0.045, if I just slide 2 units to the right, and then, which is like times by 100%, I'll have 4.5%. Now if I want to make a little note to self here, I'm going to write here, times by 100, and then carry along that percent symbol. So that will be 4.5%. Let's try the next one, 0.34, and I'm just talking this through with you. Hopefully you're sliding the decimal 2 units to the right in your mind, and you're saying that that's 34%. If you're hearing birds, I was wondering that too. If you're hearing birds chirping in the background, I'm in my sunroom as I do this with you. So lots of birdies. 0.0002. Now let's convert that to a percent. So hopefully you're thinking slide 2 digits to the right. So if we do, we'll have 0.02%. Now realize that that's a sliver. That's less than 1%, a sliver of a percent. All right, so you can have a tiny little percent like that. Next one, 0.789. Hopefully you're thinking that that is 78.9%. So nothing hard there, just practicing really mental math. We're doing these mentally. Don't get tricked on this last one. 2.5. If you slide that decimal 2 to the right, what percent are you going to have? Hopefully you're thinking 250%, right? So if you think about it, if I want 100% of your money, that means I want all of it. So how can you have more than 100%? Well, double, triple, right? So if I want 200% of your money, that means I really want double your money. So you can have more than 100% in terms of a real world application. So let's see the next one, the next slide. Writing a percent as a decimal. Replace the percent symbol with its fraction equivalent, 1 over 100, and then multiply. And don't forget to simplify your fraction. So, basically replace percent, which means per centum, means per 100. So what I like to do is, 60% really means 60 times 1 over 100. Or you could even jump to saying percent means per 100, so you could just say 60 out of 100. But then clearly that's going to reduce, and you'll have 6/10. And we could even keep reducing that, in terms of its fraction form. We could keep reducing that, or we know 6/10 as a decimal. If the goal is to get to decimal form, which it is here, we know that 6/10 is 0.6. So it depends what your goal is. If your goal is to get to reduced fraction form, I could keep reducing that fraction and say that's 3 out of 5. So either way, I'm going to get 0.6 as my decimal equivalent. Okay, so let's try going the other way now. So and I'll do these one by one. This one, this one, this one, this one, this one, this one. So 75% really means 75 per 100, or out of 100. Reduce. So 25 goes into 75 3 times. 25 goes into 100 4 times. So we have 3/4. And then you might know that by heart, that's 0.75. You may know that by heart, or you may have to divide the denominator into the numerator. Okay, let's try the next one. 3.45%. Now, I could follow. I do want to mention, some people say, look, if you're just trying to get it, back into decimal form. Ooh, I just noticed the typo there. Let me fix that. I just noticed fix that. Convert all of the following percents to, it shouldn't say ought, it should say to. If you're trying to get them from percent to decimal form, you can take this approach that I'm doing now. But there's an alternative approach. You might say, well, gee, I'll just slide the decimal 2 to the left and I'll have it. So I did want to mention that. You might be able to look at this and intuitively say, reverse the flow and say, gee, I know that's going to be 0.0345. That's probably the fastest way of doing things. But another approach to that would be to say, to write the percent symbol as per 100. So I could say 3.45 per 100. And then I'm just kind of thinking, an alternative path. If I say 3.45 out of 100, and then it's awkward to have a decimal in the numerator of your fraction, so I'll multiply top and bottom by 100. Well, that's equivalent to 345 out of 1,000, right, out of 10,000. So then even if I think about it doing that way, I'm still going to arrive at the same place value, 345, 10,000ths. So tenths, hundredths, thousandths, 10,000ths, see? So either way, I'm still arriving at 0.0345. So when you get really comfortable with the mental math, I just want to make a little side note here. To go from percent to decimal, you could just, little side note, you could just slide the decimal 2 units left. Reverse the flow. So that'll make our lives a little easier in this one. If we just slide the decimal 2 to the left, then we're going to have 0.00025 for that one. And let's just keep trying that now that we're getting comfortable. So 4.9%. as a decimal then. Slide the decimal 2 to the left, and we'll have 0.049. So you can just kind of, and I'm just going to remind myself here, slide decimal. And maybe I can do this in another color. I was just thinking that. Just to illustrate it, slide this decimal 2 to the left. 1, 2. So it's kind of like you're going boing, boing in your mind and realizing that you're going to arrive here. So slide decimal 2 left, and we realize that that's probably the fastest way to do it. And last but not least, 300%. Well, you know, the decimal's really back there, right? So if I slide it 2 to the left, I'm just going to end up with 3.0. And that's exactly right. Because 1 represents 100%, 2 represents 200%, and 3, or 3.0, represents 300%. So that makes sense. All right, hope that helps. I'm going to hit pause here a sec. All right, and let's see what we have cooking on the next slide. Okay, on the next slide, we're going to write a fraction as a percent. And we kind of talked about this already, but it's all good practice. What is 4/5 as a percent? The answer is 80%. Some people are really, they have good intuition with this, but if you're looking for a general recipe, divide the denominator into the numerator to turn it into a decimal first, and then send it to percent form, you know, by sliding the decimal 2 units to the right. So, all right, let me just think about this one here. So if we divide the bottom into the top, 5 into 40 goes about 8. And then, so there we're looking at about, you know, we're looking at 0.80, which is slide the decimal 2 to the right, so you have 80%. So we see how that came about, but let's see if we can follow that strategy for all of these. Okay, so let's grab the first one. Let's take 4 into 1.0, and I know it feels awkward to take a bigger number into a smaller number, but we know how to do that. 4 doesn't go into 1, but it does go into 10 twice. 2 times 4 makes 8. Draw the line and subtract. Bring down a trailing 0. What's called a trailing 0. 4 into 20 goes 5. 5 times 4 makes 20. Draw the line and subtract. So, aha! So now we're seeing that 1/4, now that's a common one that most people already know. 1/4 is 0.25, and now we know, slide the decimal 2 to the right, and voila, you've got 25%. So I like to think about it like this. 1 out of 4 people like that movie. Well, that means the same thing as 25% of the people like the movie, right? It's a minority. So start to think of, you know, about fraction to percent conversions in everyday life. Like, for example, if 3 out of 8 people like this store, let's say a new store that opened, well, that's a minority. So I better not end up with a percent over, you know, 50%, just by gut instinct. So, all right, let's try this next one. 8 into 3. So 3/8 is equivalent. Let's take 8 into 3.0. 8 into 30 goes about 3. Draw the line and subtract. 3 times 8 is 24. Draw the line and subtract. Bring down a trailing 0 there. That's what I did. 8 into 60 goes about 7 times. So, you know, there's no way for us to dodge this longhand division, you know. 8 into 40 goes 5 times. And if you're wondering how I did that, I brought down that trailing 0. 5 times 8, pulling down those trailing zeros after the decimal, you know. 3.00000 is still 3, so that's legal for me to do that. Draw the line and subtract, and voila, 0.375. So what I'm getting at is 3 out of 8 means 0.375. And then, let me use my eraser here to give me some space from that other one. And then we know that we can just slide the decimal 2 to the right, and that will lead us to 37.5%, which makes sense because 37.5% is a minority, right? It's less than 50%, and 3 out of 8 is also less than 50%. So it has to make sense. 2 out of 3, I always think, that's a majority, 2 out of 3. So it should work when we try the division. So now that we did that division, you can hit pause and see if you can beat me to the punch. But I can tell you that when you perform that division, you're going to arrive at 2 out of 3 is 0.66 repeater. 0.6 repeating. So if you slide so that means, like 0.666, right? And so if you slide the decimal 2 to the right, you're going to have 66.6 repeater percent. So really close to 67%. Rounded. So that's a majority. All right, now this last one. This is a fun one. Try to convert 2 3/4 to a percent. Well, you may know in your mind that 3/4 is 0.75. So you might say, all right, I'm looking at a mixed number, so I'm looking at 2.75. But you're still following that strategy of slide to right. 1, 2, and then place the percent symbol. So 275%. And that makes sense, because if I tell you I want 275% of your paycheck, that means I want, more money than you currently have, like, almost triple your paycheck. So 2.75 times whatever your paycheck amount is. So, all right, hope that helps. Let's see what's cooking on the next slide. Now this is your ultimate challenge, the FDP challenge. Can you fill in this table correctly? So maybe you want to hit pause, try it on your own, but 1/5 is going to be 0.2 as a decimal, which is going to be 20%. Now if you're wondering how in the heck did I know that 1/5 was 0.2, remember you can always go off on the side and divide 5 into 1.0. 5 goes into 10 twice, and voila. So you can always go back to taking the bottom into the top and dividing that out. Let's keep playing. It's kind of a fun little game. How do you go from 0.32 decimal to percent? You slide 2 to the right, so hopefully you're thinking that's 32%. And here's neat. If you have 0.32, how do you state it as a fraction? Note to self, just use the place value to get it to its fraction form, meaning tenths, hundredths. Aha, that's 32 out of 100. And you can reduce that. I'm not so worried about reduction. You can reduce that on your, divide the top and bottom by 4 or 2 until you get it to reduce. I'm not worried about reductions right now. But I can write a little note to self off here, reduce if need be. Now this one, how do you move from percent to decimal? Hopefully you're thinking take that decimal and slide it 2 to the left, reverse the flow, so 0.015. And then same thing, the place value on that, the place value is what's going to get us to fraction form. So tenths, hundredths, thousandths. So 15 out of 1,000. And voila, we did it. And I said I'm not worried about reduction there. So just, practice moving back and forth from fraction to decimal to percent. All right, hope that helps out there.